Why is it the people that have music blaring out their cars? It's always the worst music.
Because they're the kind of people where their inconsideration to their own ears is only matched by their inconsideration towards others.
Like, I don't think I've ever had anyone drive by me and I'm just like, sick.
That's a banger.
That's a banger. It's always just like nondescript, just like
trap music.
Blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, right, all right.
Okay. I mean, does any music sound good when it's not from within the car that the bass is playing from?
I don't think any music sounds that good when it's forced through that kind of subwoofer inside. It's got to, like, I'm just sound like an old man now, but surely that really impedes your ability to do anything.
I think the acoustics within the car are significantly better, and they're designed to be better, but still, in that enclosed space, just wear some headphones.
Just wear some. Well, you shouldn't wear headphones when you're driving.
Well, no, I mean, don't. You know what I mean? You get my point.
Maybe just have your music at a reasonable volume.
Also, if your volume's that loud, isn't it the same thing as having fucking headphones on?
Well, my point exactly.
Oh, that's why the windows are down, so they can still hear that. They're actually being
considerate.
They're being considerate and responsible drivers.
Okay. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, flavour design, and lore, and road health and safety. My name is Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
Oh, I didn't say I'm your host because I threw myself by doing that comedy intro.
Have we actually done a regular intro recently where one of us doesn't fuck it up or change it somewhere?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not to just no but you. Well, actually, yes.
Because I'm sure recently, like, there's been a few times where I've deliberately like mixed it up just to be annoying, and you've hated it every time.
Yeah, well, you have been annoying every time.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Today we're talking Bloomburrow.
Bloomburrow.
We are fresh off of the back of MagicCon Amsterdam, and by fresh I mean like
2 weeks.
Yeah, literally 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We came back on the 1st of July. I've been on another holiday since then.
You have.
Get me.
Gallivanting about.
Montenegro and Croatia. Went to Amsterdam, Budvar, Kotor, and Dubrovnik, all within the space of a month.
Look at you.
Look at my carbon footprint.
Nice.
we got the train on the first one.
There we go. So yeah, because I did a similar journey, and we trained 2 parts of it, and it was actually way better. Like going through customs for airports is, as everyone knows, a bit shit. Not that going through the Eurostar customs was any better.
Well, they didn't. So I know there's a debate amongst Magic players, not a debate, but like, oh, pardon me, but an urban legend, a myth of people. I suppose it's not a myth if it's actually happened to people.
Yeah,
but there's this idea that, you know, they always open up your debt box.
The bias.
Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
None of us got a
No, none of that. I think it's one of those things. Also, it depends on, like, I guess if you're a collector, right, and you're sending a bunch of you're taking a bunch of cards with you to sell or whatever, it will look like a giant brick of cardboard. Whereas for us, like, half of my suitcase was, but you can see it's all compartmented into different. But I don't know. Maybe different people are.
They definitely. I watched them take my suitcase. Like, stop the conveyor belt, and they looked at it on X-ray for a good long time. And I didn't have anything else nefarious in that, as far as maybe they just don't care on trains.
Yeah, I think it's also a bias because in America the airports are a little bit more strict because you can carry guns and things like that. So the idea of explosives is obviously a little bit more like, ooh. I mean, I'm not saying that certain countries respect terrorist threats more than others, but America is, is definitely a country that would put much more emphasis on making sure you're not bringing lots of C4 into the country.
We don't give a shit in Europe.
Yeah, it's like, what are you going to blow up?
Yeah, you're getting the train. What kind of fucking... Yeah. Anyway, that's Eurostar for you. Wow. We are talking Bloomburrow. I haven't even had a drink.
Yeah, I have.
Story today. And yeah, only 5 episodes.
Right, so, big controversy, elephant in the room. 5 main stories, 0 side stories, and a plane that is new and had 3 Planeswalker articles to
3 Planeswalkers
to really fully give it the space that it needs to flesh out and be known, because there's only so much you can put on 250 cards. Like, I think it was one of those things of where before the story had started to drop, people were already question marking it, being like, but why wouldn't you do a full 10 stories? And now, after the stories dropped, people are even more curious, because the pace of this story was actually surprisingly good for a 5-part story. But once you get to episode 3 and you realise you've only got 2 more going, you're like, well, we know that nothing more is going to happen in this story, because they've got to do the build up to the cliffhanger and then the end of the story by a normal traditional Magic story pattern. So the fact they could have done maybe 7 or 8 episodes for this, or done an epilogue like they did with Thunder Junction, the big score being the extra set and the extra bit of story we got, that I think arguably made that story as good as we thought it was by the end of it. I think without that Jace Vraska perspective, I think the whole story falls a little flat, and it's just Kellen's final arc, and that's cool and whatever. They didn't tie into the grander scheme of things. This doesn't tie into the grander scheme of things whatsoever. It's only like a surface level kind of hint at a lot of the 10 or some of the 10 different animal folk that we see, not counting the ones outside of Valley.
Yeah, so
it's narrow, right? It's narrow, it could be superfluous, but yet still, the story I feel like had enough depth that no one's really complaining about it, but everyone would have liked more.
I don't know, man. I don't know. So the story is very simplistic in terms of its structure. It is a very sort of like straight down the line story of heroism. They go on a hero's quest. Yeah. The end.
It's a novella in the truest form.
But I just kind of feel like the story is really representative of the plane itself and what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Now, the side stories, if you think about the side stories in other planes and other story arcs of like what they've told and how they've told it and the way that they've used the side stories, they're usually fleshing out either legendary creatures for like different products that they want to flog, like some of the Planeswalker decks, or they're trying to tell maybe like an A and B story with like the Planeswalker's journey for the main narrative versus like the kind of, I don't know what's happening on Ravnica this week sort of stories or whatever else. If you were to say to me like, well, what stories would you have written on the side stories for Bloomburrow? I guess the two that I could think of is 5 side stories where other Planeswalkers come to come to Bloomburrow and they get furrified.
The critter comforts or the critter.
Imagine critters.
Imagine critters.
Yeah. Oh, fucking Tamio visited Bloomburrow once and now is a rabbit, right?
What a surprise.
Which would have detracted from the Ral doing the same thing in this story.
Yes, I agree.
And the other story arcs, which I think they could have done, which would have added depth, but I think actually, again, the mystery is kind of nice, is that much like Arcavios and Strixhaven, Bloomburrow is a plane where they have like a long history of like darker magic times.
Sure.
And they could have done histories of like Lily of the Valley, which is like one of their ancient mythical figures.
We don't even see in any of the cards or any references to in the cards, which is a shame because there is a. Having read some of the Planeswalkers guide, there is definitely lore of Bloomburrow that would have been interesting to hint at.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier about the Planeswalker, not the Planeswalker, the Commander decks. Yeah. Like we didn't really see any bird folk, and one of the commanders is a bird folk. Yeah. So it would have been nice, considering I think we only saw 6 of the main. Especially in the main party, you only saw 5 of them. But I feel like it would have been nice to have seen some of the different animal folk that we didn't really get a hint of, regardless if they're in the main party or just like we just breeze by them. Like we only saw a tiny little hint of the squirrel folk, a tiny little hint of the rat folk. We saw nothing of the bird folk in particular. It would have been nice to maybe do a side story of one of those characters.
But it wasn't really like a guild-led set. Yes, there are 10 main sets of animal folk and adjacent animal folk to it, and yes, they're in colour pairs. But it's not like Ravnica where each one is like super distinct. And in fact, the whole idea of Bloomburrow. This podcast episode, by the way, guys, is on the assumption that you kind of know what's up with Bloomburrow because we've dived straight in. Read the Planeswalkers guide if you haven't done. But like their whole culture is the fact that they even explicitly say all these animal folk trade and like share. Yeah. So they're all together.
And the thing is also there's a bunch that aren't represented in the 10 guild format for the set from the Mel side of things. All well and good, that works. From a Vorthos point of view, there are skunk folk, there are weasel folk. There's loads of different folk that we don't see represented as a specific colour combination. Like, say, there's only one fox in the entire set. Despite Jace's Imagine Critters version, there is only Mr. Foxglove as another fox in the... And we don't obviously see smaller versions of the Calamity Beasts per se. But then again, that's another thing that I would have maybe liked to see is that a story of a Calamity Beast forming. Yeah. That might have been quite an interesting thing to see from the antagonistic side of things. So it's not just this is a storm or this is a tidal wave. It's like, no, we actually get to understand what happens and what forms them. There's a lot of, shockingly enough, in these one set kind of breeze by, here we are for a moment, and then we're off somewhere else kind of sets. We don't get a lot of metaphysical explanation. One thing that's really, I'm gonna say ahead of getting into the story arc, as it were, is that we don't really have a lot of hint of outside of the plainness. There's not really much talk of omen paths.
No.
There's not any talk of this Phyrexian invasion that would have happened a couple of years ago, which makes us, or leads me to believe that it didn't reach Bloomburrow.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember whether it was an article or something somewhere. I think it's been confirmed that the Phyrexians didn't get to Bloomburrow.
Yeah, because I think the idea, right, was that Norn used Nissa and Worldbreaker to kind of go to all of the known planes. Like, we as outside eye planeswalkers and obviously consumers of the game, we know what planes we've gone to. And because we know all of the players from those planes, Elish has got half of them, Phyrexianized. Surely she's only going to know the planes that we know, really. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are on our periphery will also be on her periphery. So yeah, they got to Segovia, they got to Xerix, but only mildly, and we only see a mild amount of it because she almost has the same awareness that we do by proxy of the reader's eye.
Yeah, and then the more planeswalkers she Phyrexianizes, the more of them
more of what it was spread. Yeah, in fact, if anything, she got very unfortunate. Well, she got unlucky in the fact that what she did by getting weirdly anxious about having control and then making herself part of the oil was the foil for Phyrexia, right? Had that not happened, the argument is they probably would have continued to spread and it would have carried on. So it seems that Bloomburrow is not only separate from like the rest of the multiverse in that kind of aspect, but also it feels like the magics of Bloomburrow are very, very potent.
Yeah, so you have the Season of Chaos is one of the ancient times of Valley and Bloomburrow. And that was a time where the Calamity Beasts, which very much like the cosmic, what was it, monsters? They didn't call them. Oh, it was
cosmic monsters. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, because monsters is also a Korea.
Yeah, but I think they were still called monsters.
Okay,
or beasts, some kind of.
They're the ancient sort of avatars, if you like, of Bloomburrow, and are like the incarnations of seasonal change and calamitous change, which I think in the context of the animals of Bloomburrow were seen as being like a bad thing, but because Bloomburrow doesn't have natural changes of seasons, this whole story of Bloomburrow, much like many other stories, but this one explicitly so, is actually about the push and pull and the acceptance of even violent change, but like the change of nature and working with the seasons, and you are fragile, but you have peace, but you're not necessarily in control of the chaos around you. So the Season of Chaos was this ancient time of basically royal, and the folk of Bloomburrow developed magic, and they developed the Order of the Holy Leaf, which was a band of heroes that developed magic to fight against the Calamity Beasts.
Yeah, it's almost like the Calamity Beasts are the natural forming of the magic of the plane, so the denizens had to work out how to weave that magic into something that they can then use to survive. You know? It's not even necessarily they wanted to stop the Calamity Beasts, it's just that they've got to learn how to live in harmony with these ridiculous forces of nature.
But then they themselves seem to discover across, I think it's called the War of Cinders, which is a little bit like the Blood Age, again on Arcavios. This is why I draw parallels, because it's like where the magic is just way over the top and they've kind of almost burned themselves out.
They've done this thing a lot of where they go, there was this really horrific, chaotic age but before we get to the plane where it's all structured. Because I think creating a plane based in chaos doesn't work when you need a formulated structure to create 256.
So during this War of Cinders, the folk of Bloomburrow weave this magic to such a degree where they can fight against a lot of the Calamity Beasts. Not all of them, but many of the ones that they see as destructive, whilst leaving the ones that they see as helpful, like the season changes, kind of let it be. But then there's this idea that the weavers of magic get so powerful they themselves start to turn mad, and there's this kind of urban legend within Bloomburrow that actually the power of the weaving is also the power of the Calamity Beasts,
and you will turn into one.
Potentially, the Calamity Beasts were ancient, and also all of the Calamity Beasts, what they are either elk and things like that, which are immensely powerful, or predator-style animals.
Predator side of it,
were the ancient denizens of Bloomburrow a lot more of the predator-style, like wolves and bears and things, that their weaving magic was so primal, they became the changes of the seasons. Do you know what I mean?
It's almost like the plane required this energy, this magic to go through something, and obviously the Calamity Beast might not be able to have the conscious crime in South London
every time.
They might not have the. Just wait for it. Are you coming or going?
They're going.
They're going. Okay, cool. It's almost like the plane requires these forces of nature to exist, and the Calamity Beasts probably aren't aware of what they're doing. They just know that this is what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Like, it's very clear, I think, that Meha, the Night Owl, isn't a bad,
malevolent.
Yeah, it is malevolent. Doesn't have a conscious kind of desire to hurt. It's just, you know. And then in the story, we'll get to it in a moment. The story itself, the only reason why she's running amok is for like a justifiable reason. Otherwise,
a reason that's so justifiable and relatable that even the characters within the story is like there's parallels. It's not just like, oh well, I guess they're like it's our fault. It's angry. It's like
at the height of the antagonization of this story, it's basically a bit of a douche dude who wants power over something that he doesn't understand, and someone who likes money.
Yeah.
And that's as bad as it gets. There's no grand overarching
But that's
evil.
why I think this storyline, as simple as it is, and the fact that we do only get 5 episodes, is actually weirdly evocative. I know I'm fucking squaring like holes to make it work, because really more story is more story. But in essence, they've told a very simple story, because within the simplicity of like the narrative of like, you know, it's a bit like Studio Ghibli with My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of conflict, but the threat of the unknown and like the feeling of dread is real.
But then also that feeling of the unknown also invites the curiosity and the whimsy of the unknown, and it almost plays in equal measure of before you turn on a light of a room, there's the fear and there's the worry, but there's also the wonder of what could happen, what's going to be in
the denizens of Bloomburrow. A lot of them, not all of them, because it's kind of like knowledge lost to the mists of time, but many of them understand that within their world there is a grander danger. And there's a line, is it in the first or second episode? I can't remember, where Mabel, being one of the sort of noble mouse folk that are all sort of very sort of hearty and, you know, they proclaim these heroic things, says something along the lines of, we live in a peaceful existence, but that peace seems very fragile.
Yeah,
it's because they all know that within some, because they're all animal folk.
Yeah.
Like they know within
tiny little critters.
Inside each of them lies this weaving that, if they're not careful, could be calamitous for all of them. You know?
Like it's like any mouse isn't scared of a snake because the snake is a bastard. It's scared of the snake because the snake needs to eat, and it happens to eat mice,
and they can't control it.
No, and I guess this is a nice point to make, because it feels like the story's very low to the ground because the plane itself is very low to the ground.
Yeah.
There isn't a great amount of knowledge of what's happened in the past. There's only one out of the many animal folk that really harbour and hold on to history, whether they understand it or not. Even all the augurs are kind of given this kind of like, oh yeah, well, I know you're going to say that, but it's probably not. Like they don't seem to have objectivity of their own ability or understanding and knowledge and all that kind of thing. It feels very fresh. It feels like quite a new plane that's just kind of now understanding how the magics of it work, which again is helped by the fact that it doesn't seem to be adulterated by very many mages at all, which brings up a big question of, how the fuck did Jace go there? Why did Jace go there in the first place?
Well, yeah, we'll get onto that when we talk about the story beats.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. But it does feel very much like this is an unfettered plane left to its own devices, and this is what it can feel like. Yeah. You know? And it's interesting that they've highlighted and gone so far into this kind of Enid Blyton, Wind in the Willows kind of theme, because it keeps it far enough removed from everything else that you don't want to build in the overarching questions, and it can kind of just be left to its own devices.
Yeah.
And it does create this very separate particular niche that makes it feel even more even identifiable compared to something like Lorwyn. Because there aren't humanoid of any kind of variety.
No, we haven't mentioned that yet. Yeah, there's no humans.
There's no like giants or goblins or even anything that isn't an animal.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. As far as we're aware. It doesn't make any mention of this happening in the grander scheme.
They don't have any ape folk either.
Yeah, right.
They've kept really far away from it.
Yeah, it's all very much, not to say the word England too much, but it's very English countryside. Okay, yeah, there's a bear. Okay, there's a puma.
Well, apparently, so I was looking into the ancient animals, flora and fauna of Britain, because I was always, so this is a complete sidebar, but it's funny that you mentioned bears, because I was like, why is the wolf so fucking synonymous with a lot of English old folklore? Wolves and bears and lions, but lions we can...
Oh my.
Yeah. Lions, oh my. That's a great Predator 2 reference.
No, that's no.
The lions, the bears. Oh, well, that's in Predator 2 as well.
From the fucking Wizard of Oz. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
But what's his name? Yeah, fucking, what's his name? Gary Busey. Gary Busey says it in Predator 2.
Yeah, he takes it from the Wizard of Oz.
I know it from Predator 2.
Great, good, fantastic.
Anyway, it's because, like typical fucking humans, like typical fucking English, really, and I can say that because I bloody well am one, like, we hunted all the wolves and bears to, like, extinction.
Well, we were were part of the continent at one point, right?
Yeah, we had it all.
We happened to shard off and then do the thing of we cold so much that weirdly enough bears aren't going to swim the channel
Like
and come back
all the medieval
repopulate.
like sort of knights and whatever with all their shields and shit. Like we're bears, and it's like, well, there are no fucking bears now.
The lion.
There was
the lion doesn't make sense, but again, we did that whole we'll go and conquest other countries that have these more scarier animals,
Leopards,
and we still win them and whatever. Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah.
Anyway, so let's do a quick drive-by of the story since we've talked about it enough. Now,
Valerie Valdes is the author.
Valerie Valdes has done an amazing job.
Lost Cannons of Ixalan was her last run.
The style of her not just dialogue, but the inner monologues and everything. The quality of her writing, like the narrative of this, is fantastic. The depth we get to go into at certain things. I imagine you've done what I've done, which is every episode you've got like a couple of little quotes of like, this just sounds really nice.
Yeah.
The way that she's speaking through these animal folk just seems to really fit into her style of writing. And trousers around my ankles, complete honesty. Both I definitely offered to do the synopsis for this and then completely forgot I was supposed to. So bear with me while I absolutely steal from Aetherhub because they've done a story summary. I'm not going to read it word for word.
No, you shouldn't have admitted that. You should have just done it.
Well, no, I don't want people to be like, I've read the one from Aetherhub and it's very clearly.
But it's such a simple story. It would have just been like, who's going to say? Who's going to know? Well, everyone who listens to this is now going to know.
Well, anyway, the five stories. This is just in case I missed something.
Do you know what I'm going to have to do now? So I'm going to have to put a link to the Aetherhub link in our thing.
Perfect, good. That's cross-pollination. We've got three main protagonist voices. Helga, who is our little frog folk. We've got Mabel, who is our mouse folk, the one we've kind of seen is in all of the promos and stuff, even though I don't think the animated one is supposed to be her.
No, because all the mice are a part of this same sort of order of swordsmen,
exactly.
Right?
And then you've also got Rao, our resident. Hey, this is someone that everybody knows, and we've got the kind of like I don't want to say the reader's perspective, because the reader's perspective is supposed to be a little bit of Helga, as that frog out of pond, not fish out of water, but that kind of feeling of, hey, I'm learning how to be part of this system. And then you've got Raoul kind of looking from a regular magic point of view of being like, what the fuck is this plane? Why am I a fucking otter? This doesn't make any sense to me. But the actual story itself is very easy and low to the grounds. So let's get into it. Episode 1 opens to our what I'm going to call our main protagonist, because I genuinely think this is the eyes we're supposed to see it from, and it's actually probably the most relatable character out of all of them, especially for our particular demographic, and that's Helga. Very unsure of herself. What are we calling her? A frogling?
No, well, she's a frog folk.
She's a frog folk. I don't know, but frogling sounds nice. Anyway, what age are we also assuming her to be? Like late teen, early 20s?
I don't know. Well, this is something they don't tackle in a lot of these.
Because obviously most animals of this size have varying lifespans,
right? Yeah, they don't tackle any of this.
Because mice usually should live a lot shorter than, say, an owl would, whatever, but they don't seem to mention this much. Apart from they do say generations, they don't give a year date on that, they just say generations
I assume all animal folk have a relative to human years.
Yeah. I think they kind of also have to do this anyway, and there's a few things they've deliberately skirted around talking, because I think it would be a bit too awkward to talk about the metaphysics of it, because it brings that whole, J.K. Rowling, if they just can magic their poo away, why do they even bother with toilets anymore? You know, you can get the... You know, Andy's giving me a very specific look. We're going to not talk about J.K. Rowling anymore. So story 1 is Helga in Pondside, which is the little village that she lives in within Valley. Valley specifically being a very only a certain part of Bloomburrow. We don't know much about the externals around it. And she is being chastised by her rabbit folk adoptee family about her inability to perform chores, focus on things, all very relatable subjects that as I was reading it and going, there's a lot of people right here going, that's me, that's exactly what I'm like. And then before we get to have too much time settled in with her, a calamity beast, Meha, the night owl, comes and ransacks, destroys, blows up, in general just cause an absolute upset of Pondside, causing Helga to run away and flee down a river. She ends up... we then cut to Mabel, which might be one of the most cutest sequences of her with her 3 little mouselings. And is it Clem, her husband? Mm-hmm. Clem, her husband. They have the loveliest little relationship as well. There's lots of really nice dialogue and descriptive work going on here to kind of like give us an understanding of how peaceful and lovely Bloomburrow is. She is a hero... I wouldn't say a hero of old, but she's definitely almost like past her hero years. She has Crag Flame, which is a shard of... is it Wild Seer, the wolf calamity beast?
Yes, it's Tooth.
Yeah, so there's been a shard of its tooth that's been fractured off back in the days of the Cinder Wars, and then handed down generation by generation to her, and she's essentially like an old hero. They're holding a birthday for her because she's such a noted part of the village. Is it Oliver? Oliver the mayor comes along, being a typical rabbit folk, and I don't know if it's just you. But for me, whenever we get to rabbits and they're personified or anthropomorphized, they're always the most irritating motherfuckers in the world.
Well, part of the Planeswalker's Guide, what they very helpfully do is for each of the animal folk, the line at their best they are something and at their worst. I think it's at their worst.
It's very D&D, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think something at their worst they're narrow-minded and cowardly, and I think that's sort of very, very true of Oliver. Like he's nice, but he's a little bit cowardly.
I can always feel their feet tapping.
Yeah.
As you know what I mean, their little ears twitching. It's very cute. And then again, there's little things like as he's walking past different conversations, his ears twitch to keep up on the gossip, so he can always hear everything.
Oh, he's such
happening.
a fucker, isn't
he? Again, Valdes does a very good job of painting all of the characters in the right nuance of what you should feel when you think about them.
Yeah.
He's trying to convince her during her birthday to give a big speech after the bar does his thing, showing off the Cragflame sword before she can properly. And I want to come back to this conversation a little bit later, but before she can properly rebuff his advances, someone comes running up, speaking of someone, a frog folk who's washed up on shore on the riverside who needs some help. This, of course, being Helga. Mabel goes back, rescues her, brings her back to the house. Helga then gives her story of what happened about the Calamity Beast coming and destroying her village. At this point, Mabel takes it upon herself to think, hey, okay, maybe we should go out there. Maybe someone should go and have a look-see, make sure that the Calamity doesn't spread further. We then cut for a third time to Raoul, who is... At the time of when we first get him, he's still on Ravnica. He's trying to figure. Well, he's actually in bed with Tomek. There's a lot of sexy times in this story, which I'm sure we'll get to as well. And Tomek, so Raoul basically is still fretting over the idea that Jace is alive. The first thing he says is, "I'm going to kill him." And from Tomek's point of view, he's saying, but I thought you said you wanted to find him. And Raoul's like, yes, I want to find him so I can kill him.
Yeah.
Like, Raoul really doesn't like Jace. Jace is almost the antithesis of Raoul's, like, pretend debonair, kind of everything's cool, I've got everything under control. Like, it's almost like, I don't know if there's, like, an aspect of jealousy to, like, the freedom that Jace has.
So I think the big thing with Raoul, obviously they did have a thing where when Raoul's character was introduced, he was under the, like... thumb of Bolas.
Yeah.
So and that just meant that Jace was against him because Jace was the fucking Superman of magic, right? But I think they're both nerds. They're both blue mages. But where Raoul is kind of flashy and a bit like, hey, check it out, I'm Mr. Electric Man and I've got cool hair and a cool boyfriend and I work for a dragon. And then like Jace is like, I have to illusion like my fucking stomach and my muscles and now I've got a cool snake girlfriend. Like, I think Raoul is so annoyed because this little fucking nerd is like the hero of the multiverse, and he's like, "But I'm the cool one."
Yeah, I'm the cool dude. I reckon had they grown up together, they probably would have been quite good friends.
But then, but he's right because basically what Jace has done is he fucking made it all about him. This is now just big story shit. He made it all about him. Was like, I'm gonna take the Silex. Oh, I've been Frexionized now.
Well, the thing is, Raoul doesn't know all of these specific details, right? Because he wasn't part of the Planeswalker.
Jace fucks off. Everyone then mourns him like fucking Iron Man style in like Endgame, spoilers for Endgame, and then like he comes back, and not only does he come back, and this is what the whole fucking thing we said about the story, he comes back, everyone's like, Jace, it's you, and he's like, yeah, peace out, Digimon time.
Bye.
And he fucks off, and everyone's like, what? And he plays them all!
So the thing that blows my mind about all of this is that I do kind of feel sorry for Jace, because he's still also got the thing on his mind that he's the only one who knows that Bolas is still alive, right? There's a lot of shit that Jace has on his shoulders.
I don't think we need to feel sorry for Jace at all.
Okay, I'm just going to say now is that I think that Raoul doesn't have that much on his shoulders, and he's jealous that Jace has all of this import circling around him. And now that Raoul's settled,
girlfriend's a cool assassin pirate
now
queen.
that Raoul's settled on this lovely happy marriage, he's like, you know what? I want to be pissed off about things, and this little weeb's over there pretending he's going to have happiness. No, I'm going to fuck up his happiness.
He's a fucking weeboo, and now he's got the I am fully on Team Raoul. Fuck him up.
Anyway, so Raoul wants to go and find him. He thinks that the only person who can is the Wanderer. He bounces over to Kamigawa.
Oh yeah, the Wanderer's in this fucking story.
We find out, because he's like, there's only one person who I think who can help me. And Tom's like, do you think she will? And everyone's like, oh, who's it gonna? And immediately he just goes, yeah, it's the Wanderer.
Oh yes.
And so we find out that her spark is gone. Oh my god, thank God. She actually gets to settle down and enjoy her life. Why are you tapping your lips?
Because we know where we know.
Yeah, but we don't know that yet. But the whole point is, it's nice. It's nice to know.
She's in Dustmore, and it's okay.
That's gonna be so loud. So we know that she hasn't got her Planeswalker spark, which is kind of important for her because obviously it causes her to bounce around because it's a fractured Planeswalker spark. So if anything, of all the people to lose their spark, this is someone who we can feel pretty good about happening to. And she basically turns around and goes, "Hey, I can't help you, but what you need to do, because I've learned this, is that you can track his ether trail, kind of like how Jace did during the Dominaria United story, of where I have him kind of like surfing through the blind eternities, grabbing onto someone else's ether trail, and then landing on the Weatherlight, which in my mind, the canon of that is fucking incredible.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like
it's like the Bifrost for me, right? So he goes to Thunder Junction. He has to stand below, obviously, where the vault was because it's all collapsed and broken down and everything now. And he manages to get, as he says it, almost like a whiff of green, as if someone has tried to smudge out a word from a page on a page. Tried to erase it, but not quite fully done so. He grabs hold of that kind of scent, goes through the blind eternities following after it, ends up on Bloomburrow, and then we get just the tiniest moment of him on Bloomburrow, realizing that he puts his paws to his paws up to his face. He feels his whiskers and his fur. He feels his tail, and then the line is, "I'm going to kill him."
Now
he's just been pranked so hard.
This is
at the height of his the incensed anger at Jace for his grand betrayal of the entire multiverse, and then on top of that, Ral thinks he's just led him to this little fairy plane and turned him into an otter.
This is, I think, a very good turn by Valerie Valdes. And this sets the tone, I think, for when we're talking about, okay, it's a simple story, but we know there's like all this danger and blah, 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 blah. Like this low to the ground nature that we've been talking about. Because whenever Planeswalkers go to a new plane, and you think about being a Planeswalker in general, and you think, okay, I could end up in fucking Wrath or Equilor or God knows a Courier Ware, whatever this and the other. You've got to be... There's this constant sense of anxiety, I can imagine. If you're an anxious Planeswalker, you're fucked. Because no matter where you go, you're like, I might not be able to breathe the air for some reason.
Yeah, man, it must be really... Like, when people think, oh, Planeswalking sounds cool, it's like, you wouldn't, though.
What if you can't swim and you go to a plane that's all ocean?
We've already said this. What happens if you end up in the abyss?
Yeah. So, for the fact that Raoul goes to a plane, that literally changes his entire physiology. But his reaction isn't like, I'm going to fucking die, what if I never turn it? But like, his reaction is, oh, you fucking bastard.
It genuinely, what I wrote down is it feels like he got pranked like a 90s TV show. Yeah. Like, it's so funny.
And like, the entire time that Raoul's in this story, he's not being like, I'm a fucking otter, I can't believe this. He's just like, yeah, whatever, cutesy plane, I'm on a mission. And it's like, so it just goes to show that these Planeswalkers who have done and seen it all, he couldn't give a shit. He can't give a shit about the calamity beats throughout this story. Doesn't give a shit about the fucking plot line. Like, he's there because he's got his own mission, and it's like, he really doesn't feel like he's in any danger.
I kind of also feel like ever since he saw Jace on Thunder Junction, this has been tunnel vision for him.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's anything else apart from his relay thing. It's funny as well because there's not a lot of mention of like what Niv's like plans for him might be. Like, he should be really fucking busy right now. Doing all of his relay stuff through the Omen Pass, and yet he's so laser focused on getting getting Bellerin and killing Bellerin that it's kind of like, I kind of find the obsession a little bit cute. And let's see how far it goes, but I do kind of like this idea that he's going to eventually catch up to Jace with this kind of wizened, bearded kind of feeling of like, do you have any idea what I've gone through to get to you? And Jason be like, I don't even remember who you are.
Oh, He would say that little fucking shit as well. All right, so Mabel's on a quest.
Yep.
Raoul's there.
Part 2, an unexpected party. The reason it's called Unexpected Party is even though there's an expected party of her birthday, with all of the news of... so when they get Helga... We don't know at the end of the last story about Helga's story. She takes her back to Mabel takes her back to her home. Helga comes around and then tells them all about the Calamity Beast.
It's also a Lord of the Rings reference.
It is, yes. Sorry.
It's the long expected party and the unexpected party are the first chapters in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
All of the.
Just
it
saying.
does feel like the Shire, does it not? It does feel like the Shire.
Yeah.
Because it does give me that impression again of the rabbits being a little bit annoying, a little bit pestering. I'm like, it gives me that Hobbit folk kind of thing of like, God, you're so annoying because you haven't been told how not to be annoying because you're just so separated from the rest of the world and you're allowed to all be these kind of like weird little fucking dirt foot carrot eating plebs.
Wow, Dirtfoot absolutely sounds like a slur in the world of Bloomburrow. I don't know if I love it.
The dirt folk. So
God,
Mabel, and this is quite a short synopsis because all that really happens is that Mabel organises a party together made up of a rabbit folk called
Phineas.
a bat folk called
Zoraline.
a badger folk called
Hugs.
a lizard folk called
Ged.
and then herself and Helga.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's the initial 6. And they get told that they think that the the idea is that they want to go up to the next village to kind of find out exactly. Oh no, they want to go back to Pondside to find out exactly what the situation is, where they can rescue anyone. This is just a very small rescue party. We haven't gone on the grand quest yet. We've not gone to there and back again yet. As far as everyone's aware, all they're doing is going up to the next little village to make sure that everything's okay and check in on the situation. They do so. They go there. Everything's in disarray. Everything's absolutely messed up. But what they do come across are some squirrel folk. And the squirrel folk are kind of like the necromancer bad guys of Bloomburrow.
Not Gev.
I thought so. And then they overhear the squirrel folk talking about Cruel Claw and about the job didn't say it was going to be doing this. So because they overhear them and then find out about the grander plots, it turns out that Cruel Claw has been travelling across Bloomburrow, and in his wake, calamity beasts are following him.
No one knows why.
No one knows why. But they know that the reason why these things are happening out of season, again, Bloomburrow, they know that certain seasons should bring certain things, that it might be too early for the Summerhawk, for example, stuff like that. They know this shouldn't really be happening. This is out of concert with how the plane naturally goes. And the plan is now to follow the Cruel Claw to his next destination, which I believe was Portside.
Was it Three Tree City?
Three Tree City, but it's the Docklands that they get that they go through.
Oh yeah, Portside. You're right. Yeah. This is another classic example with the world building team where, and they did do this with Thunder Junction, but I sort of wish with the world building they would spend maybe just a little less time coming up with different locations and more of like coming up with the feel of the plane, because as much as I really enjoy a rich narrative, you can tell all these fucking world builders are D&D players, because it's like and there's the port town, and then the slums are called this, and then there's a village called that, and you're like, motherfucker, we don't go anywhere.
We don't need
any of these places.
Shh, hush now.
Just say the port town and we know what the fuck you're talking about.
So they go they travel they go to travel towards Three Tree City. And there are multiple ways they could do so. They could go through by the mouse folk and go through their villager. They could go through the outskirts, which have certain lizard folk homes across scattered around. Or they could go diagonally as the bird folk flies across the dandelion fields. As they're crossing across the dandelion fields, they come across what they first perceived to be a calamity beast, but it turns out it's a dragon hawk. Or we only know it's called the Dragon Hawk because we've seen the spoils for the set.
So yeah, Helga, when in the first story, draws a picture of what looks like a calamity beast. So Helga's an augur with powers that are kind of a bit weak and pathetic, or at least that's how they're perceived to be.
Her active cantrip magic seems to be bad, but her augur magic, which a lot of the folk of Bloomburrow don't seem to put a lot of credence into.
Because she's a bit of a fuck up.
Also because it's soothsaying, predicting the future's a little bit whatever, and it's not through an actual, like, directed means, like, say, with the bat folk who use the stars to predict things, that kind of thing. People
or other frog
her
folk which are better at it.
Yeah, so they dismiss her quite frequently and quite often.
But she uses a sketchbook to kind of channel her augury, and one of the things that she sketched in the first one, which wasn't Maha the Night Owl, which surprised her, was the image of a giant hawk with 4 wings, a kind of bestial face, and then webbed
at the end of the...
Of each wing, which she attributed to looking like a bat folks.
Yeah.
And the fact that the storm followed this beast, which none of the other beasts seem to have. And it's Raoul that actually spots it and goes, that's not a calamity beast, that's a dragon.
Yeah.
Because he through his own transformation of being furrified. I don't
Furrified.
I keep saying it. Crittered.
I actually prefer
Furrified, yeah. He kind of, it's kind of a good... Do you know what? I had this thought pop into my head as I've been talking now, and I've realised it's the same thought I had at the time. You know when you have the same thought twice, and you go, oh, that wasn't a fresh thought. I thought, well, how the fuck would he know? And I'm like, oh, well, actually, he worked for a fucking dragon. He's worked for 2 dragons. Yeah. So he knows dragons,
if
right?
anything, it's very helpful to have him here because it does give that outside perspective of him going... And at no point, we should mention, does he ever really elucidate to being from another plane. Like, there's not explicitly, because Bloomburrow again seems relatively untouched by the rest of the multiverse. There might only be a couple of other planeswalkers that have come through here. it's interesting that he doesn't outwardly say, "Oh, this has come." I mean, he even mentions under his breath, "Oh, this is from another plane," and someone goes, "Excuse me," and he goes, "Nothing. Don't worry."
He doesn't expand on it, which is interesting when you think of the fact that the omen paths now exist. Planeswalkers are getting much more used to the idea that en masse
everyone should be knowing about other things. Does it come across to you that Rao is just being flippant and being like, I don't have time to tell you anyway? Or is he respecting there's no point telling you things you won't understand?
I think he's totally blinkered. I think this is, for him, this is a little side quest. Yeah. So he's not bothered. He's not
actually paying attention to what's happening
so many
around him
times
as much.
He keeps going on about, like, I don't necessarily care about this. Like, even he says it almost literally, I don't care about what's going on here, but as long as you're my link to Beleren, I'm going to stick with you.
Yeah, true.
So, but the thing that interests me is that Say for example, we have this understanding of omen paths and whatnot. Usually, from what we've seen in story, although not in the cards, I know in the cards it's slightly different, it's been legendary creatures or sentient beings that are actively going through the omen paths. Is this the first instance? Because it's a Colligan clan dragon.
I'm still semi-convinced that it actually still is Colligan. They just haven't named it because no one in Bloomburrow knows their name. And I think that it detracts a little from it just being a random Colligan dragon. Because if any random Colligan dragon or of the Colligan brood can come through and wreak this much havoc, how has there not been more damage to the plane?
So are we saying because obviously this is the first story in the new Tarkir Dragon arc.
The Dragonstorm arc.
Yeah. And that's been confirmed. So it does make sense that much like all the way back in Valhalla, Kaldheim, when they dropped in the first Phyrexian and everyone lost their fucking minds, the new Phyrexian arc. This is that drop. It's like, oh, there's a dragon here, and by the artwork, less so the actual storyline, by the artwork we can tell that it's a four-winged Colligan dragon.
Four-winged. The thunder magic as well. And I think it would be almost a disservice for it to just be a random Colligan dragon rather than it actually being
Colligan
herself. Yeah, I mean that's just me. I mean it
would make sense as to why it's legendary, but then here was a fresh thought.
Because it would be the only,
because it's the only one there.
Yeah, and again there was a little mention on the Reddit post of this of being like, well, why wouldn't they have called it Colligan? It's like, well, because no one from the plane knows it's called Colligan, but then also no one from the plane knows what a dragon is.
So any dragon would have been legendary.
So why would they have also called it Dragonhawk if none of them know what a dragon is?
Oh, well, that's a good point.
Why wouldn't they have called it Bathawk? And we know why, because a party call it the Dragonhawk, but if any other denizens of Bloomburrow, what would they call it? You know.
Well, you have that with Dracosaur and shit like that.
Well, it's kind of almost it's a similar thing to Zendikar, where they had Ula, Cozy, and Emeria, where those were their centuries long understandings of the original trio names, and it's just their perspective. Anyway. So they managed to deter the Dragonhawk by Phineas firing a copper spun arrow into the roof of its mouth, or into its mouth, and then Rao does his whole lightning magic
zip
zap boof. It causes a tumultuous rainstorm, which they all hide under, cotch under this little outcrop. Helga does a little bit of magic without even thinking to kind of shelter them, to stop them from the water from hitting them. Rao walks out from the monsoon. Obviously, none of the rain touching him because he's a rain mage and he can just do that.
He's a monsoon mage.
Isn't it really cool that you can, if you're good with weather, you can just make it so weather doesn't touch you and you're just dry at all times.
You would have thought that if you're really good at weather, you wouldn't care.
True. Also that. Yeah, also that, I guess, yeah. It's like a merfolk isn't going to care about being wet, right?
Yeah.
Fair. Anyway, they make their way to Three Tree City. They get to the dockyards, docklands, whatever they're called. And as they're doing it, as they're getting there, wanting to go into the main city to try and investigate further, they notice that the river is rising way above high tide, swelling way more than it should do, and it turns out yet another calamity beast. Notably, the Dragonhawk is not obviously a calamity beast, and they even make a mention of saying it doesn't act like a calamity beast should. But they come across their second calamity beast, the Floodgar.
Yeah.
I thought it was Gnar. Gnar.
Well, also, it's not the same name that's on the card for what seems to be the same calamity beast as well.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this causes a massive, massive flood. Thankfully, they've got a buoyant badger that they can all grab hold of.
Hugs.
Yeah, they all do like their own little bit of thing to try and stay, to try and be okay. And it turns out they all just have to grab onto the badger as they're washed downstream, past a tributary. And as they all wash up by this cave side, these rat folk come over with a very clear message of, "You're not welcome here.
Yeah,
please bugger off.
Out. Yeah,
get out of here." And that's how episode 3 ends. Episode 4, of soothsaying and storm calling, I believe.
You got a good memory. You're not even reading that.
No, I know.
He's not even reading that.
Yeah, I've bypassed. It's also we missed where we met Raoul in the story, but it was sometime between.
He was in a pub.
Yeah,
they met him in a pub.
Well, what they managed to go by some random. I think it was a frog folk who went, "Oh, you're the second person today who's been asking around these parts about someone they're trying to find." And Helga shows up. Helga's like trying to show like pictures of the hawk or something, and then Raoul looks over the shoulder and goes, "That's fucking Jace." Okay, since know who Jace is.
Yeah, that is. Let's double back because that's actually quite a good interaction. Just very quickly, it's the Raoul can't describe what Jace looks like because he doesn't know.
Yeah, because he's saying things like tattoos and the
they're like, "What's a tattoo?"
It's like he's wearing a blue cloak. Yeah, exactly.
So, and then when Helga shows a picture that she's drawn in her Augur state of what looks like a foxfolk Jace, Raoul's like, "Oh, that's him.
That's him," and he's very much. Since you're the only iota of information to this thing that I'm laser focused on, like I'm now with you.
Yeah,
I'm not leaving your side. If this is where you're going, I'm going there with you, which is kind of nice because he could have been an even bigger dick about it, but he wasn't.
Yeah. Anyway, zip back.
So we're now with the rat folk. They realise that they mean no ill will, and they take them into their burrow, this deep cave system. That apparently was made in ancient times by giant insects. Now, if that's not a scary thought for animal folk, I don't know what is. Imagine giant centipedes, because there's no real bugs in it. Well, actually, that's a lie. There are bugs, but we'll talk about that in the Flavor episode.
I found a big old grasshopper in my boat yesterday.
Big.
Like, well, it was about that big.
Oh shit, that's about 3 inches.
So it's big for me. I was in there. I was having a shave, and I was turned around, and like narrow boats are a tight space, right? It's a narrow boat. And I turned around, and I was face to face with this fucking thing upside down on my wall. And it's like sometimes I get big ass spiders because you have to keep some spiders on the boat because they get rid of all the mozzies and the flies and things. But some of the big thick legged boys, I kind of whip out. This thing jumps for a living. Yeah. So I'm like, how the fuck do I...
And it has wings. Why does it need both?
How do I get... So I grabbed a cup and I went zip onto the wall and then thing under it. And I was like, but this thing was like... It would be a meal.
You could hear it fiddling in the...
God.
Yeah, right. Again, right. So
anyway.
So insects, scary. Grist, just stop. So they get taken down into the cave system. The rat folk are known on Bloomburrow as being almost like the librarians. They're the history... Lore masters. They hold all of the histories. They go into this kind of big library room. It's a bit dishevelled, but it is stacked. All of the walls are stacked up with all these histories and all this different knowledge. It's moments like this where I really wish that the party could stop and have a little read, because this is the moment where I go... As someone who's never been to Bloomburrow, I would spend so much time inside this room because there's clearly a lot of information in here that people don't know.
It's like the Biblioplex in Strixhaven,
but at least everyone on Strixhaven knows how important the Biblioplex is. What I imagine on Bloomburrow is 95% of the denizens don't even respect the fact that the rats have knowledge of their past. It's almost like they're blinkered. They go, we don't need to know what happened in the past. We need to live in the moment.
Yeah, we're eating strawberry cake.
Yeah, shut the fuck up. Who cares?
I think that's quite charming, though.
It is, and it's honest because a lot of I feel like the average countryside kind of feeling is that who cares what's happening on those big cities, in the big parts of the world. Like, this is the small part of the world.
Well, that's certainly
the
kind of
matter.
That's sort of the language of storytelling is that country folk do country folk things and city folk are...
City mouse versus town mouse. I literally learnt that fucking story in Latin, and it's very much the idea that both have very different perspectives on life and neither can live in the other one's world.
But it is interesting, isn't it? How I mean, like a lot of sets now, they're trying to challenge a lot of like assertions of either colour pie or maybe what they've been doing with things previously. Rat folk, they seem to, along with Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and now this set, I say and now as if they're back to back, but like sets that have rat folk as a prominent
rat folk
thing.
Rather than rats.
Yeah. They're really trying to push rat folk as being a bit more like societal driven and like so
they technically are.
So like the raccoon folk in this set are the ones that are the kind of junk divers, whereas the rat folk are kind of they're underworld dwellers, but it's because they're kind of scurrying away lore.
Yeah.
A bit the squirrel folk feel the same
hoarders.
sort of thing. Yeah. Squirrel folk are the same sort of thing as well in this set, where they're kind of loners, but they have their secrets,
So so it's funny because you look at rats versus squirrels, and by common standards, everyone always says that squirrels are just rats with better PR. Right, and the idea is that they are much cuter, they look much sweeter.
That's true, yeah.
And even in the world of magic, yes, rats are always presented as being these more gnarly kind of things, whereas squirrels are quite cute. In this setting, the squirrels are the necromancer bastards that kind of raise all of these bad things from the bones of calamity beasts, and the rats aren't really known as being nefarious or evil in any way, shape, or form. And it makes sense for them to be blue-black because they live in the sewers, in the underwater areas, like rats are swimming creatures.
Well, isn't it funny how they've made them the enemy pairs against I suppose the allied pairs against mice, which are white-red, and it goes.
But white-red is more supposed to be valiant and brave and wanting to fight,
right? But they're cousins, animalistically speaking. They're like they're cousins, but they do their valor in like completely different ways.
Yeah.
The mice are all about preserving the society that is, whereas the rats are about preserving the memory of the society that was.
Yeah. And I guess the idea, right, is if you just take the idea of who are the knowledge hoarders, then of course they're going to be black-blue because those are the colours of holding on to knowledge, of documenting it. I'd argue that a library, in essence, that idea of hoarding all of the knowledge is fairly black. That idea of it needs to be mine, it needs to be kept. So this idea of it belongs in a museum feels a little bit black to me. I know it sounds like a noble idea, but the idea is you're caging it and keeping it somewhere.
I guess white-blue is the show of knowledge. It's like the kind of the oppression with knowledge, whereas black is the keeping of knowledge and like the scurrying it away.
And also maybe the understanding of it and the using of it. I mean, the idea of using dark arts and things like that. Like, it feels very blue-black, but is it always necessarily a bad thing? Who knows? Anyway. The rats aren't presented to be bad. They're also not the only ones that are in this society. There are mole folk as well that exist here in this burrow kind of area. And what they basically need now is they need to know what the next step of their journey is. So they kind of lean on Helga to perform a bit more augury. And she does a typical thing that we see in stories of where the protagonist tries really hard to do the thing, and they knows that everyone's relying on them, and so it creates extra pressure, and then they can't do it. And then so what instead she does, or she has, what's the idea is that Mabel says that the light isn't something you need to find. It is something that's within you. You just need to uncover it.
I think doesn't Zoraline say that?
Zoraline, So it's not a matter of you digging deep to find it. It's about letting it expose itself to you.
Yeah.
So what she then starts doing is just drawing spirals, and then as far as she's aware, she says like time blurs like ink on a page. And it's like, oh, that's such a nice term as well.
Yeah, very good.
The idea being that then she starts painting, and this vision of Fountainport, or is it Fountainport? Fountainport, yes.
Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah.
Fountainport, and being the next place that they need to go to. Obviously, the idea is that she's already been portenting a lot of what's going to be happening anyway. The fact that she drew the Dragon Hawk as well, so that she knew that was kind of ahead of her, without really knowing that that's what she was doing deliberately. Unfortunately for her, Fountainport is where she originally came from. She was under the tutelage of King Glarb.
King Glarb.
And what's funny is... burying the lead, he's the bad guy, and you can kind of tell on his card art that he has this kind of glib, kind of like, oh yeah, whatever, kind of
There's definitely two modes of sitting in Magic card arts.
Yes.
And there's noble sitting, like Queen Marchesa, and like, although she's a baddie, but they're all baddies in Fiora, Queen Marchesa or King Kenrith. Or there's evil sitting, like Tassica and King Glarb.
Where he just has that, oh, you're just a douchebag, aren't you?
Yeah.
So she's really worried about going back because she doesn't want to go back home to the place that she was, she shamed herself. And essentially what happened with this is that as she was supposed to be performing some kind of magic, Glarb's special scepter ended up going through one portal. She then changed the portal to be above his head, smacked him on the head, then spiraled off of the top of the fountain back down into the depths. And it was like one of these kind of like, oh no, I've done goofed in front of everybody.
She slapstick fucked up and hit the king in the head.
Exactly, kind of style. So she doesn't want to go back there, but they go back there anyway. They manage to get a audience with King Glarb. And then they do this thing of where they tell him everything that's happened. It's like, oh, Cruel Claw has been taking this calamity egg. He's already taken it from their nest. It's already causing and wreaking havoc across Bloomburrow. We trace him to here. We just need to find out who he's giving it to. And King Glarb does that thing of going, who else knows about this?
Yeah.
That thing that
lock the doors.
If ever you tell anyone something bad and they're in a position of authority and they ask the question, who else knows? Say everybody.
Yeah,
everybody knows.
And everyone knows I'm here.
I told everybody, because then she goes, no one, and he goes, okay, then we get to kill you. Then, and obviously out of the side door, fucking Cruel Claw and all of his band come out.
There's a fucking screen made out of a leaf in the middle of the throne room, and there's a line.
They're just all behind it.
There's a line that Valerie Valdes puts in there, and it's like, a screen that is suspiciously out of place in the middle of the room, and that thing falls over, and Mahar's egg is behind it.
Yeah, oh no!
Oh shit! It was here the whole time.
Yeah, there are a couple of nice hints of like when they're talking, Helga, because she's staring at King Glarb, notices a shift in his attention when they're mentioning these things. Like, it's not very. It's like the duplicity isn't laid on particularly thick. It's a veneer, a very slight veneer of, who knows what's going on? Because the point of this story isn't actually the story. It is the journey and the inner monologues and the journeys that we kind of see, which is quite nice. But there's a big fight that ensues. They end up obviously overpowering and managing to beat back both Crawlclaw. There's this moment obviously where Crawlclaw's being like, "I'm a professional. You're an amateur. I'm a what does he say? I'm a bandit. You're a baker."
I think he says I'm a fighter.
Fighter.
And you're a farmer.
And
she says I'm not a farmer. I'm a baker, and fucking starts fighting. Yeah. Sick.
Yeah, like she's Mabel is awesome. Like she has such a cool characterization. We're probably going to talk through a couple of lines that really stood out to us, and a couple of them are going to be from her. She's great. We love her. Best mum. So the battle ensues. They manage to. Glub unfortunately gets away. Mayha comes barreling in, and Mabel against does the unthinkable and grabs the egg, which apparently is the same weight that she is, and so apparently she's an ant and she can just carry the same weight that she is. That's kind of crazy.
Well, she's carries around Cragflame, and Cragflame is like half the size of her anyway.
Right, yeah. And then she takes it over to Mayha, and then basically says a lovely line of like, "You've chased halfway across the plane for this. As a mother, I fully understand why."
Yeah.
Gives it back. Well, even someone turns around to question and go, "Why would you do that?" It's like, well, as a mother, I understand.
Yeah, like why would do the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if I would do, at the very least, this is what I would do. And then we get a scene of everyone get back at Mabel's place. I guess I can't remember what it's actually called. It's not Valley. It's Ponside to Good Hill. Good Hill is where Mabel lives. So they all end up back at Good Hill, celebrating. Everything's fine and dandy. Helga's going to settle on down there as well. Oh, there is also a lovely moment that I forgot when we go back to Pondside, of where she goes back into her home and picks up her granddad's hat and her granddad's wand. Thinking of it, kind of like does that whole, I guess it's my time now.
She's a wizard now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then everything ends with a lovely little kind of like, everything's fine and dandy. I can't remember exactly how the story ends with Raoul. Doesn't he get offered to stay and he goes, no, I'm alright.
I don't think, he understands that Vraska and Lute are still with Jace, because at one point they talk about a lizard folk was seen with a fox folk and a little creature they couldn't figure out. So it seems like
Lute, a dark cloud that's following behind them.
So and there was the cute line of like, he goes, a lizard but not a snake, and it's because on Bloomburrow the snakes are the calamity beast style, like, evil, exactly, and so she would be a lizard folk. But also this idea that Lute doesn't seem to have changed into another animal.
No, and also this is just a kind of hint, because obviously Helga doesn't see things clearly, so this is just something that she kind of saw generically, and because it wasn't something she was focusing on, it also kind of feels like there's an obfuscation kind of going on, of where it's deliberately, like, she can't zero in on him, like he's supposed to be deliberately out of place, but she does say animal. There's obviously an assumption that he's already a weird little bestial thing. He's probably not going to change into anything that's particularly strange, but she doesn't mention what kind of folk it is.
No.
So it probably actually didn't change and just kind of sits within
I wonder if that's a power of the Fomori.
Potentially. And also, I guess, if an actual Fomori enters, do they end up coming in like 28 feet tall with their giant elephant?
Hang on, because that's an interesting bit of world building. So on Bloomburrow, it's not like not Pyrulia. It's not like what's the one where they all go small? But Segovia. So in Segovia, it's the stupid thing of they all go really small, but because everything's really small in Segovia, it's almost like nothing small at all. But when they go to other planes, they're really tiny if they're from Segovia.
Yeah.
But in Bloomburrow, it's like they have their own size mechanics, because all the animals are big and small relative to each other.
But the plants are almost like
But the plants are bigger.
Yeah. Because everything's almost downsized to the size of a mouse.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world kind of works around that, as that a mouse size is normal size.
Yeah.
Which I guess then also means, but then we've also seen some insects that feel small in comparison as well, but still larger than what an average insect would be.
I think Bloomburrow is just the platonic ideal for forest folk. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Again, it seems like the magic of the plane is exceptionally strong. It's just young, and we don't understand it properly yet.
Yeah.
We also get one last portent of Helga. Let me try and find it quickly, because it's quite ominous what she says. There we go. So before he could retort, Helga gasped, her eyes glowing like a mirror reflecting the sun. The voice that spilled from her mouth sounded distant, as if from the bottom of a pond. "The kings in the dark will return," she intoned. "The mage in blue will bring about the end." Which is interesting, because bring about the end is quite literally a card that Jace is already in at the end of the fucking March of the Machines Wake of the Aftermath, whatever the fuck it was called, of where he's holding the Silex and he's going to bring about the end.
So the Mage in Blue is definitely Jace.
You have to assume.
Well, I'm sure that's what they're trying to suggest.
You have to assume, yeah. It's vague enough, but we should know.
Kings in the Dark for Maury?
For Maury, but then it could also... That's elusive enough that it could mean something. Because there are some people going... What if when Jace took Emrakul into his mind, Jace then started to take on a hint of Emrakul, and in the end Jace becomes Emrakul?
So the Kings in the Dark are the Eldrazi and the Blind Eternities.
Yeah, which I think is false, because the Blind Eternities, as far as we know, aren't dark, they are plasmatic.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that the idea is I don't think they're trying to be coy. Magic Story doesn't try to undermine itself too much anymore. I think it's very clearly going, if you're paying attention, this is the Fomori, and Jace is going to do something bad.
The Fomori also give me a sort of idea of kings, like with sort of horns and crowns.
It feels like they used to govern a lot, and then they lost their power. It gives me massive Thran vibes.
Yeah.
And again, bring about the end in a bad way, or the end in a good way. It's left open-ended enough that
they're gonna close up the open paths and kickstart Planeswalkers again.
Yeah, I think the idea is they're gonna do this thing, and this is a kind of a view I've seen from a few different people, of where what starts to happen is that convergence starts to happen, of all the planes start to bleed into each other, and they need to go, no more, we re-separate out again. And it's almost going to be like another mending. What we're in at the moment is we're in a magic cycle of mendings. And we're going to need another mending to sort out the last thing that fucked up when the story went, if we can keep pushing in all of these directions, we need something really major to get us back to ground zero. And they're doing it again. Which is fine. It's fine. It's not an issue. And those are the 5 stories. They literally go on a fetch quest to try and find out where this bad guy's taking this big MacGuffin, and then they get the MacGuffin back.
Having 5 stories has allowed us to do a story review episode where instead of doing like a sort of a chunk of 10 minutes to get through all the story, then talk about it, we've been able to tell the story and interject.
Yeah.
So I like it. That's a thumbs up for me there.
I actually think it's probably better because, again, saying all of the story before we break it up is fine, but then if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably already listened to the story. So just us, if anything, those 10 minutes is us just wasting your time with how we explain the story badly to you.
So, I mean, this story at its heart...
Do you think it was good?
Yeah. It's a simple story, and it's a story that is very... Again, keep talking about this language of, like, you know, fantasy narrative. It's a story that's been told 100 times.
Yeah.
With a lot of tropes that have been told again and again. But it's been told...
the Wind in the Willows vibe of this was so strong, but I wasn't tired of it. Anyway,
but like
Sylvanian families, I also got massive vibes of for the American audience.
The Misfit band go and challenge an authority figure who's maniacal. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the evil person thinks they're doing well, but they're not. You have the second in command who's like arrogant and gets like thrashed, and then you have what was seemingly the initial antagonist, Beast. That turns out to actually not be as bad. This is a Star Trek episode, if ever I saw one.
Yeah.
This is Star Trek: The Next Generation.
There weren't any red shirts, weirdly enough.
No, but it's a very simple story, but it's told so well, and it's told so convictedly within the world of Bloomburrow. And this story is all about love, which is why it's so good. It's the love of
the
parents,
bandering together,
love of friendship. Like Phineas,
the love for one's home.
Phineas has sisters who are worried about him.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
he even says at one point, "It's like, hey, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm a really good archer, I'd be really boring.
Yeah,
I'm actually just a random farmer.
I'm just a farmer, and I'm like chill with that." You have Hugs and Gev, who
what is it? The Striped Rascals.
Striped Rascals, but they
talk
about Gev talks about an old comrade of theirs that
Kiki.
is like, that's not doing what they're doing
Skunk
now.
folk.
But there's
who settled down with, I think it was a mole folk to raise ladybugs.
Yeah.
And we don't know if the quote unquote raise ladybugs is like they're legitimately just going to go and farm ladybugs, or that's what they call their critters.
But like it's kind of suggested that a lot of Gev's got a lot of bravado, and actually their sort of time as adventurers has yielded some quite horrible like outcomes.
He's got PTSD, and this is how he deals with it.
But like it's the love of his friends and the love of his friend Hugs, and like Gev is always picking spines and dirt out of Hugs' fur to try and keep him clean. It's just how he's coping.
It was for an average viewer or an average reader of typical what's the word I'm looking for? Literature.
Yeah.
You could potentially assume them to be gay coded, but I think it's just showing an intimate friendship.
They're just really they're just really good friends, and like, you know, whatever their relationship outside of that might be,
friends.
They're just roommates. Yeah. They were roommates, but like each character, their fundamental success in who they are, and the ones who are happy with who they are, is because they have love in their life that they're willing to fight for. Yeah. And the characters
they're true to themselves and their ideals.
The characters that are evil, quote unquote, are the ones that they don't have love. They want money. They're mercenaries, like Crawlclaw, or they want power. And it's a tale as old as stories go, but it's told so sincerely that I just think Valdes is just absolutely smashed out of the park.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the Calamity Beasts are painted as not being... They're bad in the same way a tsunami is bad. You can't blame a tsunami, but you have to prepare for it if you can. And if you can stop the tsunami, you will. There's no real bad guy. Even Glab was only doing it out of his desperate need to be like, but the only way to protect against Calamity Beasts is to have one under your own control. So when the egg hatches, maybe we can then control that, and then the magic of that Calamity Beast can protect us from the other ones. You know, like, I guess at the worst point, Crawlclaw is the only one who's bad because he's like, snicky snick, I've got my poison blade and stuff.
I'm a mercenary.
But he's like an absolute parody of evilness, which you have to be in this kind of world because everyone's goodness is an absolute parody of righteousness and nobility.
I mean, there's a line from Mabel where it's about whether she's sort of debating whether she's the one to go on this quest because she's a little bit advanced in years. She has her littles and she has her
in a dowdry as Clem mocks her.
Yeah, but there's a line, and I'm paraphrasing it because I haven't brought it up, but it's the idea of but in the end someone needs help and she can help, so she will. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And you think that really hit me as because that is all virtue really is.
Yeah.
Are you able to help? Yes.
Do I have the ability?
Yeah. So you have to help.
I don't want to make it Marvel. It's the Iron Man thing. I have the power to help, and I have the impetus to help. So if I don't, that's on me.
Yeah.
It's a very honest tale. And again, the only thing I'm disappointed about from the set as a whole is that we just don't get the side stories that give us a bit more of the plane. Because this is the story of Bloomburrow, and this is the only story of Bloomburrow really that you need to know, that the animals have that feeling of let's just band together and get on with it. Let's go. And there's only so much you can write of that before you go, I get the message, I understand what's going on.
But do you not feel, and this is no dunk on the writers or the world building team per se for Thunder Junction. I think this is just a sort of symptom of what they were trying to do with that set, of it being like it was too many things in one. Do you not feel like these 5 stories have more of the feeling of what Bloomburrow is than, say, the 10 stories that we got with Thunder Junction?
So, I've got a theory for you, right? And it's just come to me now. So, what they should have done is reverse Thunder Junction and Bloomburrow. You've got the hero plane and the villain plane.
Very good.
And how much more vacuous is a villain's ideals and goals compared to the ideals and goals of a hero?
Yeah.
And this is why this is a nice righteous, everything feels like it's lived in and loved, and because it's a nice homely place. Whereas a villain plane is, of course, just going to be, what's our secret lair of the week kind of thing. So it's going to feel very surface layer. It's not going to have a lot of integrity past that, because that wasn't what the story or the creative team were focusing on. They were instead focusing on banditry and outlaws. So whatever the backdrop was didn't matter, because these villains would be villains no matter where they went. These heroes are heroes because of the plane that they come from. And that's kind of builds it up from the bottom up rather than being villain top down. It's this world, what would it breed? What would it make? It would make all of these lovely little critters that have all of these very nice, down-to-earth kind of idealistics. And then what could be a calamity to these things? Well, forces of nature, the little critters. And it kind of builds out from there. So if you compare those two things together, they do read and feel very different, because I think they are two sides of the coin. Or not even two sides of the coin, they're polar opposites of each other. So you don't have that integrity on the villain side, because villains tend not to have integrity, especially not in the way that they wanted to present them in Outlaws of Thunder Junction.
No, it was about they were all fucking each other over for a big score.
This is a Saturday morning, 9:30 in the morning, like Villain of the Week episode, whereas this is a series of, as I say, like 6 books written by Enid Blyton. Like it's a Wind of the Willows kind of story. So it kind of, again, the plane almost reflects the story they want to tell as much as the story reflects the plane that it's on. And it kind of works in concert with each other.
I loved it.
I thought it was lovely. Again, we haven't mentioned it, but Raoul not understanding how to use his tail, utter highlight.
Oh, there was an interesting bit with Raoul's. We've actually spoken quite a lot about Raoul, even though I think he was maybe my least favourite part of the story. The idea, so he got turned into an Otterfolk, presumably because the magic of Bloomburrow went, what do you most like? And he turned him into an... Right, I'm not talking about the gator.
It's funny, though, because it's a proper double entendre.
It's got to be a thing where they went like, well, of course he's going to be an otter. But in terms of the otters of Bloomburrow are the ones that use electricity magic. But they don't get affected by electricity.
True. Yeah,
But,
I think that's interesting they mentioned that as well, because it does seem that the water magic is more of their focus, but obviously water presents or what works into weather as well.
Because like the frog folk were also water weavers, but the thing which was really interesting, there's a line where when they're trying to stem the flow of this flood that's happened with the serpent, is that they go, "Oh, Raoul, can you not like push the tide back?" And he goes, "Well, no, I'm a rain mage."
I'm a rain mage.
And they go,
and they was like, that doesn't make sense.
But
surely you could do all water.
But
right?
it's like it's really funny distinction how like on Bloomburrow, like they made him an otter folk, but to still make him even more of a fish out of water, they went, he's not even the same as the other otter folk on the plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but he can do things that other like. So yeah, it's just...
I think that's almost an inevitability as well, because otherwise, how would he possibly know? It's not like the play knows like this is the kind of person you are. Like this makes it's an interesting. How does the magic of Bloomburrow work? And again, they're not going to go into it properly because it requires way too much explanation.
Well, when we do our Flavour Picks episode next, we'll have to do a section on the Imagined Critters cards that are coming in the Planeswalker in the decks.
I feel like some of them are clever and some of them are very lazy, and it kind of, for me, it shows that they don't even properly know how the magic of Bloomburrow works. They kind of just need to go, we're only going to really dip into it a little bit because, again, it asks too many questions.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to go by some just bits that were really nice to read. The first bit we get about Mabel's kids being the mousy mischief makers, a bit of alliteration. I thought that was very cute, where Mabel is describing her conversation with Oliver almost like a sword fight, of where he's presenting
fencing,
a flurry of jabs, and then she knows how to block and riposte. Is it riposte?
It's pronounced riposte.
Yeah. It is riposte, right? Yeah. So the block and riposte, and then it didn't work. It's the way that kind of, she sees things in two different ways: as a sword fight, and as a and as a thing that she can bake. Because right at the end, there's another line. Oh God, dear Lord, where is it? No, I lost it. Oh, I can't remember. But it was like a laugh in her belly rised like a bun in the oven or something like that. It's like the Valdes does a really good job of the way that the characters describe things is informed by who they are and what they do and the kind of person they are. Which is fantastic because it makes it feel way more honest. It makes it feel, I don't want to say more relatable because you're not that person, but it makes you understand that motive more because you're going, like the way they describe it, the simile, the metaphor for it is very, very clever. Similar to like the idea of the rabbits always feeling impatient and annoying to me. I'm like, that's good writing because I know that's how they're supposed to be written. They're supposed to be written to be impatient and kind of a little bit bothersome. And it kind of plays into that anthropomorphization that we've kind of seen done over and over and over again. And it's done over and over and over again because it works. And it works within this story and it really personifies them effectively. Zoraline? I always want to say Coraline now. Zoraline. Yeah. Always being asleep on the back of Hugs.
Yeah,
never
so
waking up for anything.
She hangs up on the back of his, brace, I guess.
Yeah,
Braces,
just hanging upside down off of his shoulder strap, essentially. Alerts the Dragonhawk to them by having a dandelion brush, and then she just sneezes and she's like, why are we even it? Like, that proper, again, it's super cliche, but it works.
Yeah.
And then even when the flood happens, she doesn't wake up immediately. She wakes up slightly further later, and all she does is just mildly complain about the fact that her fur's wet, and then goes back to sleep again.
So, I mean, there's a nice sort of through line where Zoraline at several points is able to fly back to the previous villages to let them know that everything's okay. So they're actually never that far away from where they were previously. It's just they're going into the unknown situations.
Yeah, I guess we understand that Valley, we don't know how big Valley is per se, but this is all happening within one Valley ecosystem. And the far extremes for a mouse folk of one end of the valley to the other is like us travelling across Europe. It is a very vast amount of space and distance to travel. The use of insects in general, we'll talk about this I think more in the Flavour Picks episode because you see it a little bit more. Like the rat folk can communicate with like crickets and things, and they can kind of it almost feels like they're the workforce. Yeah. They're not actual slaves, but it kind of feels a little bit like that kind of idea in the Flintstones of where you use the animals for different parts of your household.
Everybody's got to make a living.
Yeah, exactly, right. And one of the moments that gets me the most is where where Mabel shoos the fireflies out of her kids' rooms because that's the light source. Now that's just delightful. That's just fucking delightful. I think that was one of the main ones. Oh, and then there was another thing that people were really curious about when it first got written, and it's been answered by the fact that we find out that Helga's parents and stuff do exist. They are there. What we initially people thought is that Helga might have been a planeswalker that came to
that's an interesting idea,
and then lost her memory and had amnesia, because there is a bit where she says sometimes Helga's dreams felt so real that crossing the boundary of sleep in either direction was like stepping through a door and suddenly arriving in a different place.
Yeah, I mean that's a really telling line.
Yeah, and the idea I think was that people thought that maybe at the end of the story Helga goes to other planes, and it would be interesting to see if the frog.
Well, she could have had
uncritters.
She could have had a latent planeswalker spark that gets snuffed out by.
Oh, by the Omen... Yeah, because again, we don't know what the metaphysics of the Omen Paths do, and do they stop new planeswalkers from... Because we haven't had a planeswalker spark since the Omen Path.
No, so right? she... I mean, Bloomburrows are playing in the multiverse. These are sentient beings.
And again, you'd assume that, like we said with the insect kind of thing, of like, if it's a matter of odds of 1 in every 10,000... Animal folk tend to breed quite quickly in quite large amounts, so surely you'd assume there to be a larger amount.
Are we saying there's more planeswalkers per capita in Bloomburrow than anywhere else in the multiverse? This is
what the again, I think the idea of planeswalkers is very easily flexible. On right, you can say a random fact and be like, yeah, but that's just what they believe on that plane. Like that's not actually the truth of it, and they don't actually ever have to state it. But it is very interesting that there hasn't been known of any outside influence or multiversal influence, and again, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's the fact that Bloomburrow is a newish kind of plane is why the Omen Paths haven't got to it yet. The only reason why Jace and Vraska are able to get there is because Luke shows a map of the multiverse. And if I had a map of the multiverse, I'd immediately look at it and go, where has no one been before? And go, right, should we go there and have a little look-see? Because they would have had to have found an Omen Path to get there as well, because Vraska can't travel by planeswalking. So there must be at least a Omen Path, if not 2. Maybe Luke can create them and dissolve them.
Oh, well, there must have been an Omen Path because Dragonhawk's there.
You know what I mean? Like, so there is, but it's so individual. Or maybe the idea is that because Valley's such an enclosed environment, the rest of Bloomburrow that might be in crazy turmoil. And the other thing about Valley is that it's called Valley, but it's situated in quite a high elevated part of the plane. It's a valley within a heightened area. So maybe it's kept it separate from all of the other stuff that's happening on the plane just by its elevated nature and being more secluded and kind of tucked away. Maybe a little bit like Rivendell kind of idea of where no one... It's harder for other people to get into it because it's a little bit secluded and hidden.
Here's an idea then with Omen Paths. If we're saying that this is Colligan, this Dragonhawk, are we saying that there's a direct Omen Path from Bloomburrow to Tarkir?
I think yes. I think what the Dragonstorm arc will probably show, or what I would imagine from your typical, this is what magic does, the idea that Sheoldred was originally going to be on Eldraine and things like that, like that they'll do one from each of the broods will be on a different plane. Yeah. And I think that it just made sense for Colligan to be the first one with the storm, and then maybe we see Silumgar in Duskmourn, maybe we see Dramoka on I don't know, like Lorwyn or something like that. And on each of the planes, we have a hint of one of the broods being on there. Everything linking back to Tarkir. Also, do you not think that Omen Path has a little bit of synergy with Hedron and Ugin's Nexus?
Well, if there's one plane where the dragons are going to come back, and there is a specific dragon that might have to come back only through an Omen Path.
Bolus, exactly. Yeah. So maybe there's a little bit of a hint that that's kind of where... Because we don't know whether... I know the Hedron... magic was a combination of Nahiri's lithomancy and Ugin's understanding of like colourless magic and things like that. Again, we're massively speculating tinfoil hat theorying. Tim hat.
We got our Tim hats.
But I do think going back to what I said before, I think it'd be disappointing if it wasn't genuinely actually Colligan. As much as some people say like, well, isn't that convenient? It's like, yeah, but I also feel like of all of the dragons that might be willing to go and stretch their horizons and go and chase the next
Colligan,
thing, Colligan would.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't think it's too much of a betrayal or a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to go, only the Elder Dragons managed to travel, But then also, they didn't put Elder Dragon on the card type. It's just Dragon, right? Is it Dragon Bird, maybe even, I think? Yeah. But they didn't put Elder on there, so I think they're deliberately leaving it vague enough that it might not be, but I think it would be a shame if it isn't. That's clearly what's eventually going to happen, is that all of these different dragon things are all going to lead back to Tarkir for some big culmination. I just don't know what that culmination is. We might even get a little hint of Narset going, yeah, so, 6 years ago when I was on Ikoria.
Yeah.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Remember when I was on Ikoria? And, maybe it's something to do with...
I was buying some books.
And there was a book about this specific thing that I was looking at because I've been studying this Nexus since the last time you saw me, which was about 7 years ago.
Remember all those crystals? Well, guess what? They're the key to unlocking the multiverse.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? So
these are all Planeswalker sparks trapped in crystals on Ikoria.
So I think it would, again, like the Ozolith idea, something was in it. There's so many open threads that I think it's silly to try and predict anything too harshly.
Are we going back to Ikoria?
We haven't got not
we're
with
not,
any
are we? It's
particular
Lorwyn's
hint.
been confirmed.
It's also the one where they said there would have to be really good reason to.
Oh, we just did the fucking thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think overall we get a really lovely read. Like, this is the kind of thing of where don't listen to the audiobook per se just because that's the way you normally digest things, because I think that this is the kind of story that really works when you digest it yourself slower. You can read through it, you can reread lines to go, oh, but the softness in that line. Like, you can really immerse yourself, and this is a proper cup of tea in the afternoon kind of story to settle into and really immerse yourself in, because this is the only story we're going to get of Bloomburrow. God knows when we're going to go back there again, but it's such a lovely place to exist in. Especially when we've just had Phyrexian bullshit and then some other bullshit. We're going to be going to horror plane bullshit. Like, this is just such a lovely... This is all of the things I would have loved from a revisit to Lorwyn, but it now allows Lorwyn to just go and do its normal thing. It doesn't have to lean into the cutesy. And for something that's cutesy, again, we'll get into this in a Flavor Picks episode, it pulls it off very, very well without feeling like... Oh,
no, because there's some real violence in this set. And, like, a lot of the different factions are based around martial ideas. You have your soldiers and your archers and your militias, and so yes, I think this is a very good set. Yeah. Anyway, I think we're running a little bit long. I think we were going to try and talk about, if we had time, our exploits in Magic on Amsterdam, but I don't think we quite have the time. Lots of artists we spoke to.
Yeah.
I guess big shout out to all the guys that took the time to speak to us. I mean, Justine Jones,
what a legend.
What an absolute fucking delight.
Yeah.
You're great, and your signatures are rad. We both got the same card signed, but you got the rainbow signature.
I got the rainbow signature on the foil one. It's very, very cute.
You got the rainbow signature, which meant that everyone else had to fucking wait for you to have your rainbow signature done.
I specifically made sure there was no one else in the queue before I asked her to do this.
I was behind Talia Vest doing an interview, so I had to wait for that nonsense to finish. And yeah, some really cool stories. Maybe we'll do like stories from the artists at another time, because we got some really good chats. I mean, some of the artists I spoke to were like happy to chat for like 10-15 minutes about their process. And
it was a really lovely experience.
Yeah.
Got to rub elbows and shoulders with all the people that really care and love about this game, whilst also having a great weekend of playing Magic and getting very angry at your friends.
Yeah. Oh, there was a lot of salt.
We got real salt. It's probably the saltiest weekend of Magic I've had in recent memory.
But it's only because I think we're all playing so fucking well at the moment that it's just like, fuck you, I can't do anything. Also, huge thank you and gratitude to everyone that came up to us and said hello and like hi and like, I recognise you off the podcast. Like, just absolutely amazing, sort of hanging out in the content creators area, not because we had a badge, but because like...
Yeah, I wasn't hanging out there because I was a content creator. I was hanging out there so I could pester the shit out of people like Aaron Hansen.
It's because we have friends who do this thing. Do you know what I mean? And so it was nice to see them and but it's
watching them succeed years on years.
It was very funny because obviously that's where fans of Magic content hang out as well. So to be able to like hang out with people who we like, that were then also doing their thing. Like, I mean, we speak about him a lot, but that's because, friend of the podcast, Adam the Gathering ran a design your own token event. That was fucking awesome. Cool. And then to be there and turn around and have people talk to you and be like, oh, hey, you're from, like, especially as we're an audio only podcast.
Yeah. And we don't do a massive amount of like, we don't shout very loudly.
Well, no, like a lot of the time on social media, I'm not posting up very often. Like, it's not our full-time job. No. So the fact that we got recognised is absolutely astonishing, and thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let us know what you thought of Bloomburrow. Let us know if you went to MagicCon Amsterdam and you had a rad time. You can send things to our Twitter accounts, which is mine is at AndyManFace. Nathan's, yours is
at the Fox in the Moon.
Our Twitter for the show is at mtflavouring with an OUR. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. I have just seen, and I'm sorry to say, because Nathan, I know you've had troubles, I've just seen on my text messages that my Sheldon Menery secret layer is going to be delivered tomorrow. Oh, I know, buddy, I'm sorry. Just keep chatting to them. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I literally sent them a message saying, of all of the secret layers I've got from you, and I've got like a couple of dozen by this point, like this is the one that matters the most. Please get this one.
Do you have a confirmation email?
They literally said, you've paid, it's going to be on the way, there's a release schedule, shut up, leave us alone.
Well, just get back to it.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.